Well, here I am, finally starting my long adventure with the Godzilla comics. And my god, is there so many to go through. From Marvel to Dark Horse, from Legendary to IDW, who's still publishing Big G stories as of the time I'm writing this. And let's not forget the Japanese mangas either. When it comes to the world of comics, there is so much Godzilla material out there. And it can actually be a bit overwhelming when you really stop and take in how many stories there are of this character. Besides the Charles Barkley one, I admittedly have never read any of these comics. I always knew about them, but I never really cared to read them. My mind has obviously evolved since then, and I've come to admire and appreciate the comics industry now. I'm currently working on a webcomic, and I've seen a lot of incredible works out there put out by people passionate enough to work in this industry. And so comes Godzilla, who has many comic stories. But of course, we need to start at the beginning. Technically, that would mean starting with the Japanese mangas, but we're going to hold off on those for now, and instead focus on the American comics. So of course, we have to start with Godzilla vs. Megalon by Cinema Shares. Yeah, technically this is the very first American Godzilla comic, predating the Marvel story by a whole year. I figured I'd throw this one in because, well, there's not much to talk about. It's only 4 pages long, and you may think, how are they able to tell a whole movie story with only 4 pages? Well, they don't. It's really not much of a story. It's just Megalon shows up, does bad things, Godzilla randomly feels he has to stop him, along with his best friend Robot Man. They team up to stop Megalon and his partner in crime, Borodan, saving the Earth. End of story. Go see the movie. I'll be brief on this one. This 4-page comic solely exists as advertisement for the Godzilla vs. Megalon film, which was about to premiere in America at the time. The art on Megalon looks fine, somewhat, but the other 3 are hit or miss, mostly the latter. Of course, since this is American media made in the 70s, Godzilla is sporting a big green dinosaur look and breathes fire like a dragon. Coincidentally though, like the Marvel Godzilla, this one also is designed with these dark red eyes. The only other thing worth noting here is both Jet Jaguar and Gigan's name changes. I can only assume that either the creator of the comic didn't know their names, or they just couldn't license them from Toho. I'm not too sure, but admittedly, I didn't look that deep into it. Okay, well, let's get into what you really came to see. Marvel Comics, Godzilla King of the Monsters. The creation of the comic is kinda vague, but sometime around the 70s, Marvel Comics were trying to obtain the rights from Toho to make a serialized story about the King of the Monsters. Without knowing why, Toho turned Marvel down. Twice. Not even the great Stan Lee could persuade them to work a deal. But third time's the charm, and with the editor of the comic, Archie Goodwin, was able to work an agreement with Toho to greenlight the project, giving us the first original adventures of Godzilla made in America, and it most certainly wouldn't be the last. The series was written by Doug Moench and illustrated by Herb Triumph. Please forgive me if I butchered those names. Both of these two really weren't the most enthusiastic Godzilla fans. In fact, when working on the comic, they weren't really fans at all. To help get an understanding of the Godzilla series, both Doug and Herb, along with Stan Lee, went to go watch the latest Godzilla movies showing in America at the time. While Doug and Herb were less than amused at the films, Stan Lee was always trying to lighten the mood about the movies, always cheering Godzilla on, saying things like, "Go get him, Godzi!" Whether he was doing it as a joke or not, something about picturing Stan Lee cheering Godzilla on just warms my heart. So now that Godzilla was obtained by Marvel, it was time to come up with a story for the big guy. Archie Goodwin came to the idea to just throw him into the Marvel universe. And admittedly, with Marvel's vast amount of superheroes, this has potential to be a fun action-packed story. But does the comic deliver on that? Well, let's get into it. But before going in, I do have to admit that my knowledge of the Marvel universe is limited to that of the movies and some animated shows. I've never read any of the comics. So let's see if just the perspective of a Godzilla fan can enjoy this adventure. The story begins with Godzilla breaking out of an iceberg in Alaska. He then heads to a nearby pipeline station and causes mayhem, even killing people in the process. This alerts the global security organization called SHIELD, with Commander Dum Dum Dugan responding to the attack. The assault against Godzilla fails though, with even a super weapon created by Stark Enterprises failing to beat him. Thus, Godzilla leaves the victor, on his way to another nearby area to cause destruction. And that's the basic gist of issue 1. There's a lot to go over here, so strap yourselves in. The first thing we'll look at here is Godzilla himself. The design on this Godzilla came from Herb Triumph. It may look as though artistic choices were done when creating the character, but according to Herb in an interview with G-Fan magazine, he designed Godzilla the way he just thought the creature looked. You have to remember the era this came out in. Artists back in the 70s didn't have the luxury of just looking things up online to make sure they were drawing them right. And despite the movies around this time clearly showing it, Godzilla was always, or at least mostly looked at as, a big green dinosaur in America. Herb wasn't in charge of the coloring, but until an interview with him in the early 2000s, he had always thought Godzilla was green. Now I know some purists will complain about the look, but personally Godzilla's color in anything never really bothered me. A detail I do like in this incarnation is that of the dark red eyes. It just gives Godzilla this menacing look, and it's a nice trait to identify him as the Marvel Godzilla. That one shot with Godzilla chasing the survivor who's running for his life has just a terrifying feel to it. He does, however, lack the atomic breath, but instead of course has a fire breath. Though the characters do say it's radioactive fire, and his dorsal plates do light up sometimes whenever he uses it, so it's at least an attempt to imitate the movies. Take note I said sometimes, as many other moments throughout the story, they just won't light up anymore. It's at least more of an attempt than what Hanna-Barbera would do the following year. Now for the characters. You may be a bit bummed out that there are no superheroes in this first issue. In fact, not even the following issue will have any. But fret not, they definitely will show up. Writer Doug Moench wanted to avoid doing the guest hero of the month approach, feeling that would be a bit too redundant. So he decided on using the heroes more sparingly throughout the run. Acting as our protagonist in the series is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., particularly Dum Dum Dugan, who we're going to be seeing a lot of. Now I've heard of Dum Dum Dugan, but I haven't seen him in much of anything. And I'm not going to lie and say that I remembered him from the first Captain America movie, because if I'm being frank about it, I completely forgot he was in that. With that being said, I'm only getting properly introduced to the character here, and it's not really a good first impression at bat. He storms in, guns blazing, fails to beat Godzilla, and whines about it. And throughout the course of the story, he will be doing that a lot. Jimmy Woo is his partner, and there's really not much more to him than that. Nick Fury is also here, but apparently according to Moench, they weren't really allowed to use the character for this story. So he just pops up saying, "Oh, there's a giant monster running around? Well, I got other things to do, so it's your problem now, Dugan. Bye." We're also introduced to 3 new characters to the Marvel world. Dr. Yuriko Takiguchi, his assistant Tamura Hoshioka, and his grandson Robert. The 3 have traveled from Japan in order to stop Godzilla, with Dr. Takiguchi's secret weapon that we'll be introduced to later on. As far as first issues go, it's a very absorbing type of story. Godzilla's thrown into the action immediately, and even though there's no superhero battling here, it's still a very intense thriller, with Godzilla destroying things and battling the S.H.I.E.L.D. vehicles and weaponry, with Dugan even trying a suicidal assault on him. There's also some nice, if maybe unintentional, Easter eggs, such as Godzilla emerging from an iceberg, like in King Kong vs. Godzilla, and Godzilla destroying a lighthouse, like the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. There's even a bit of backstory here in Godzilla, but I'm gonna go over that in a bit. Issue 2 puts Godzilla in the city of Seattle, where he's causing more death and destruction. S.H.I.E.L.D. manages to catch up to Godzilla and shuts the power off around the city, as they believe Godzilla is attracted by the lights. A plan is then set into motion by luring Godzilla away from the city with beacon flares, being shot off in the sky. Kinda similar to how he was drawn away in Godzilla Raids Again. They bring him to a cliff, shoot blocks at him, and Godzilla just swims away. Now about the backstory on this Godzilla. There's quite a bit I want to go over here too because it may sound a bit contrived. The backstory was brought up in the first issue, but it's delved into a little more here. So apparently Godzilla was a prehistoric creature awakened from atomic testing out at sea. It's quite similar to his film counterpart, but that's not where the similarities end. He began his rampage in 1956 by attacking Tokyo. 1956 is the year when the American release of the first movie came out. And in the film he did attack Tokyo, so in a way the first movie is somewhat connected to the story here. In fact, Godzilla is also said to have battled other monsters throughout the years in Japan. So the series as a whole is connected to the Marvel world then? Well, not exactly. Yes, everything sounds similar to what was happening in the movies at the time, but it's in its own weird continuity. Godzilla here is never said to have died from his super weapon, to which another one just appears, so unlike Goji from the first flick, this one actually stays around from his inception. and the brief glimpse of the monsters we see battling with him are creatures that we've never seen in the films. In fact, you may be wondering if other Toho kaiju are going to appear here. Short answer is no. Marvel Comics did show interest in getting other creatures like Rodan and Mothra, but unfortunately couldn't do so because Toho slaps a price tag on every single one of their kaiju, and regardless of what you want to use them for, you gotta cough up the dough if you want to use them. And Toho, even to this day, has never changed their ways about this. That's not to say that there won't be monster battles here, there definitely will be, except they'll be with original creatures. Though I'll just say now that most of them leave much to be desired. Issue 3 finally gives us a battle with superheroes, but who's it gonna be? Thor? Hulk? The X-Men? Well, if you said the champions, you'd be right. Now, I have no idea who the champions are, but apparently like the Fantastic Four, they're just a team of superheroes consisting of Hercules, Black Widow, Angel, and Iceman. The character of Ghost Rider is also supposed to be on the team, but for whatever reason he's absent here. Anyway, let's see this team in action. So Godzilla is now attacking San Francisco, and my god, look how tall he is to the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, the same landmark that the monster vs. Godzilla just barely had his head over? You know, come to think of it, there's a lot of American-made Godzilla stuff where they just throw him with the Golden Gate Bridge. I wonder why. Anyway, the champions reside in California where Godzilla has now landed, so the heroes rush into action to try and stop him. Dum Dum Dugan arrives on the scene and notices the battle in progress. He doesn't take their appearances kindly and wants them to shoo off, saying, "This is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s problem." This is a point in the story where I see Dum Dum Dugan as, well, a dum-dum. You have a team of superheroes on the scene who can help you try and stop Godzilla, but instead of working in an agreement to team up, you are telling them to go away and that this isn't their problem. Well, the phrasing on that is just wrong on so many levels. For one, they're superheroes. Giant monsters are the type of threats they should be taking down. Also, California is where they reside. It's their home. What are they gonna do, just sit around and just hope that Godzilla gets dealt with? S.H.I.E.L.D. has tried 2 times now to deal with Godzilla, and ended up failing to really stop him. It's clear that they need all the help that they can muster to try and take down Godzilla. Hell, one of the heroes named Hercules actually tossed Godzilla on his back with his bare strength alone. But no, go away heroes, S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to take care of this. And I'm sure that thousands of people in the city will understand the conflict here. Well, things don't go too well for S.H.I.E.L.D. as Hercules chucks a piece of the Golden Gate Bridge at Godzilla, to which it misses and hits the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, causing it to fall out of the sky and crash into the bay. Godzilla then apparently gets bored and walks away. The two sides then look past their differences and go their separate ways. Yeah, the champions are pretty much done here. They don't side with S.H.I.E.L.D. to help fight Godzilla off, but instead just go home. I guess while on topic, the inclusion of the champions was a very compelled choice to the writer Doug Moench, who was being pressured around this time to include them. The Champions was not a very popular comic series, and even crossing over with Godzilla really didn't do much to increase interest in them. In fact, not too long after their appearance here, their comic series would come to an end because of low sales. Moench has even gone on to say that this particular part in the story, he would have much rather passed on writing. Issues 4 and 5 were a 2-part special in the run, and in a way you can say they were kind of a turning point from how the series will be from here on out. Whereas Godzilla was a killing machine of destruction in the beginning of the story, now he's still that, but only not, if that makes any sense. So we're finally introduced to a new monster, Batragon, who basically has Baragon's name, instead you throw in a T and you get a whole new name. The creature is for some reason attacking an oil tanker, but Godzilla comes in and shoos it away. We then see these masked people who were witnessing the attack. They're here to steal the oil, and it turns out that Batragon was their creature. And they also seem to both fear and work for this person named Dominicus. Given how threatening this guy sounds, I'm sure he won't be a letdown to the story. Batragon flies to the island in the illusion chain, with Godzilla in pursuit. The flying creature retreats inside a volcano that is inhabited with 3 other monsters, and they're all gathering around this shiny thing called a life stone, which apparently both heals and powers them up. We're then introduced to Dr. Dominicus, a brand new villain created for the Marvel Godzilla series, who was originally going to be named Night Gaunt, but the editor, Archie Goodwin, persisted Moench and a name change, for it sounded too similar to another one of Moench's characters in another story, Glitter Knight. I personally don't think anyone would really get these names confused, nor do I really care if they went with this or Dominicus for that matter. Anyway, Dominicus plans to build a specially made vehicle made out of a meteorite that produces the same radiation to that of the Life Stone. You see, these creatures can't venture too far out without having to make it back to the Life Stone, as it literally is their Life Stone. Without it, they can presumably die. Dominicus is holding an entire village of Eskimos captive and forces them to work on building this vehicle. Some of them try to fight back, but get mowed down by Dominicus's minions. Godzilla notices the attack from afar, as if he's like James Bond noticing a heist in progress. Also, how is Godzilla not being noticed here? I mean, you think a monster that towers the Golden Gate Bridge wouldn't be so hard to spot. Anyway, Godzilla makes a brass decision to jump in and fight off Dominicus's guards. And the narration tells us that he is purposely only battling the demons. Yes, that's what the minions are referred to as, demons. After the scuffle, Godzilla shifts his attention to the top of the volcano to get his rematch with Batragon. The two titans battle it out with Godzilla roaring the victor, but he's not done yet, as he did notice the other creatures with Batragon. And Godzilla, well, just doesn't want them living. So he goes to kill them next. S.H.I.E.L.D. makes it to the island and starts launching their assault on Godzilla, unaware of exactly what they're about to step into. Issue 5 continues the fight with Godzilla and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, with Dominicus watching from his monitors. He plans on unleashing the other three creatures once the battle has ended, planning to have them fight against whoever the tired out victor is. The plan is, however, changed though once he sees one of the choppers hovering down into the volcano. Dominicus then makes a choice to unleash them now, and all three of them start battling Godzilla. Well, all except the fly creature, which goes after the chopper, that Dum Dum Dugan and his partner Gabe are in. The fly creature here is called Leparax. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Anyway, if you couldn't tell already, this thing is obviously designed after Mothra. In fact, the cover page of this issue has the three creatures colored differently than how they're shown in the comic. Leparax has a striking appearance to that of a larva Mothra with wings. And while on topic of names, the other two are called Centaur and Gilaron. Anyway, Gabe manages to escape the chopper and infiltrate the hidden base in the volcano. But luck isn't on his side, as he immediately encounters Dominicus, who has him at gunpoint. And yes, if you're reading his speech bubble, Dominicus is specifically saying, "Freeze Black Man." In fact, he'll be calling Gabe that this entire issue. So Gabe is now held hostage, and Dominicus then starts rambling about his backstory. And he gives Gabe the entire history on how he became Dr. Dominicus. Now, I'm sorry, but this is simply lousy writing here. First off, Dominicus has no reason to tell Gabe any of this. As far as he's concerned, Gabe is just one of the many agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. battling the monsters right now. It's not like he's the head honcho of the organization. In fact, Gabe doesn't even care about any of this. He's only asking for it to stall for time until he can find an opening of escape. And it's funny about halfway through this exposition dump that Dominicus pauses himself to find out that one of his creatures are missing, not even realizing that they're being defeated without him noticing. But instead of, well, doing something strategic, he instead goes back to telling Gabe his life story. Villain of the year, folks. Well, Gabe does manage to find an opening and manages to take out both Dominicus and his armed guards. S.H.I.E.L.D. plow through the remaining minions with the Eskimos fighting back, and Godzilla wipes out the rest of the monsters. And in one moment looks as though he's about to take Dum Dum Dugan out, but he has no interest in doing so and just leaves, with one final text box saying Dominicus, while apprehended, is planning his next move, which never ends up happening. Yes, Dominicus is never going to return. Despite the character being created for this comic, he only appears in Godzilla issue 4 and 5, and that's it, meaning the whole backstory thing was just a waste of time that contributes nothing. Yeah, it explains Dominicus's origins and such, but who really cares? None of this means anything going forward. And before you start writing it, yes, I am aware that Dominicus does return in other Marvel stories, and I will briefly touch upon those when we get there. As for his run in Godzilla, well, he's pretty much done. As I said before, this two-part special pretty much takes a turning point for the story. Godzilla, who has shown to be actively destroying, harming, and killing people, now out of nowhere has a change of heart. So why is this? Well, the editor of the comic, Archie Goodwin, at first proposed Godzilla should behave like he did in the original film. meaning lose the goofy aspect of the character and to have him behave threatening to everyone around him. Moench, on the other hand, thought the opposite, and thought Godzilla should act like he did in the current films at the time. Stan Lee even agreed on Moench's case, feeling kids would get more enjoyment out of this type of story, and fans of Godzilla would just go along with it too. Finally, so we can move on from this issue, I want to talk about the art. Now, Herb Trimpe would be the penciler for much of the Marvel Godzilla story, but taking over for him in issues 4 and 5 is Tom Sutton. He does a decent job with the art here, but my only complaint is Godzilla himself. Godzilla looks so bad in these issues. At times it looks like he has a puffy face, and at other times it looks like he has the anatomy of a worm with stubby legs. And other times, ugh. Godzilla looks at his worst here, but thankfully Herb would come back to do the art for the remainder of the story. Thanks for watching. Look forward to part 2.